And if I'm reading correctly, this says Yehovah.
That's what it says right there. Now, you've definitely heard people say it's Yahweh
Oh,
and Yahuwah.
Yehoshua and Yahuwah, and just about.
So you've heard those before?
Oh, yes. I hear it every day because it's all on Facebook or it's someplace else on the internet and coming forth from people that are supposedly well-meaning, good folk, except they've got one major fault.
Oh, what's that?
They don't know Hebrew.
Shalom, this is Nehemia Gordon, and welcome to Hebrew Voices. I am today in Joplin, Missouri, with a man who is a genuine pioneer of the study of the Hebrew background of Jesus, Dr. Roy Blizzard. Shalom, Dr. Blizzard.
Shalom, Nehemia.
מה שלומך?
אני עדיין חי.
תמיד טוב להיות חי, נכון?
כן, אתה צודק.
אתה יכול לספר לי קצת על החינוך שלך?
אתה רוצה שאני אגיד לך בעברית או באנגלית?
You know what? Let's do it in English for the people. Would you please do that?
I can do that.
You have a PhD from the University of Austin in Texas, and you studied in Hebrew studies. And can I give a rundown quick, and you'll fill in some of the blanks? Dr. Roy Blizzard, PhD, a BA from Phillips University, and a major in religion, 2 different master's degrees, one Eastern New Mexico University, archaeology, anthropology, and religion, other master's degree, University of Texas, Austin, in Hebrew studies, and then finally your PhD at UT Austin in Hebrew studies. You're a co-author of a book I read many years ago. It's called Understanding the Difficult Words of Jesus, co-authored together with David Bivin. Guys, this is a foundational book. If you are interested in understanding Jesus or Yeshua of Nazareth in his Hebrew and Jewish context, you must read this book. He really is a pioneer, this man I'm sitting here with. He also wrote a book, and we're going to talk about Mishnah and the words of Jesus. Dr. Blizzard, I want to explain to people how significant this book and some of the research you've done is. I'm going to give you a chance to explain your background, how you came to this in a minute. But I was talking to my friend Keith Johnson about this and trying to explain to him what you and your colleagues did in trailblazing the Jewish background, the study of the Jewish background of Jesus. And he came up with a wonderful, powerful analogy. I was explaining to him who you were and what you did. He said, you mean he's like Lewis and Clark? Lewis and Clark had no idea what was west of the Mississippi. And then they go and they venture in, and look, they bring the Indian guide, and you went to Israel and you had your Jewish guides, but you were a trailblazer back beginning in 1966, as you'll explain to us in a minute. And today a lot of people say, oh, well, what's the big deal? He knows that Jesus was a Jew. Guys, this is Lewis and Clark, who blazed the trail that you are now walking on and you think is so easy. And it was revolutionary at the time. So, Dr. Blizzard, tell us how this began in 1966.
Well, in 1966, I had a friend of mine that had been one of my young men in the congregation that I served in Oklahoma.
And you were a pastor for 13 years.
For 13 years.
In a Christian church.
After I had my bachelor's degree in religion from Phillips University in Enid, Oklahoma, which no longer exists. But because I had studied religion, this young man, David Bivin, was studying at the Hebrew University in Jerusalem. And I had finished a master's degree at Eastern New Mexico University in anthropology and archaeology. And he invited me to come over to Jerusalem to study at the Hebrew University. And he said, if you come over, you can live with me. And at that particular period of time, he was living at Rehov Shimshon Shteim in the Baca area of Jerusalem. I, of course, was as poor as Job's turkey. I didn't have the money to go, and I went to the bank and borrowed the money.
Wow.
To go to Israel and study at the Hebrew University.
Talk about stepping out on faith. Wow.
Yes, it was. But a fortunate, or perhaps unfortunate, the way you might view the subject, is I was over there studying at the Hebrew University for about 6 weeks. And I realized all of a sudden that everything that I had
Mhm.
studied before, for a bachelor's degree, for a master's degree, everything that I had
And
learned,
13 years as a pastor of a church.
yes, 13 years,
Wow.
and was wrong.
Wow.
I had been taught, not intentionally,
Mm-hmm.
but I'd been taught from a completely different background and perspective, namely a Christian background and perspective,
Wow.
and that everything that I had learned was, I hate to use the term wrong, because
Would you say you went to Israel in 1966 with all the answers?
no, I didn't.
Meaning you thought you had all the
I thought
answers.
I had the answer.
And you realized after a period of 6 weeks, the way you explained it to me yesterday,
I didn't know anything.
Wow. Wow.
And so when I came back home, I said, man, I can't continue to do what I'm doing
Mm-hmm.
and be intellectually honest. I've got to go back to school.
Wow.
And so I began a search to find out where to go. They told me that the University of Ohio had a good Hebrew program. I flew personally, because I'm a pilot. I flew up there.
Mm-hmm.
Came back home, said, no, that's not going to work, because they didn't have any grant money. And also I found out after I was up there that they had snow. And even though my name's Blizzard, I don't like anything that's white or cold. So I came back home and began to look around elsewhere, and was told that there was a Hebrew program at the University of Texas in Austin.
Okay.
And I investigated, flew down, met with the chairman of the department, who was Bahron Ardon at that time, Bahron Aharon. And he told me, he said, well, we basically don't have any funds or anything like that. I can't promise you anything, but if you come down and start studying with us, I'll do what I can. So I just moved, my family, everything, with no assurance of anything. Went down to the University of Texas, walked in and said, well, I'm here. And he made me his administrative assistant.
Wow.
And I didn't know a Hebrew character from a chicken track on the ground.
You know what I love about you? One of the things is we were sitting yesterday and we were talking in Hebrew, and you made the remark to me. You said, you know, I bet I'm the only one you ever spoke to with an Ozarkian accent.
Ozark hillbilly accent.
Yeah, you said that, not me. Speaking fluent Hebrew. And what's incredible to me is, you know, a lot of people I think wouldn't think UT Austin is any kind of Hebrew program. So after 12 weeks, you were taking courses in Hebrew. And I don't mean you were studying Hebrew. The instruction was in Hebrew by native Hebrew speakers.
By native Israelis.
That's incredible.
Yes.
Who knew that was going on at UT Austin? I didn't know that. That's impressive.
Yes, it was very impressive for the time. Nothing else like it in the country, to my knowledge.
Yeah.
But I continued studying 2 years of Hebrew in 12 weeks. And after my first year, Professor Baradone, this is in 1968, said, if you'll go to Israel and work on an archaeological excavation at the Temple Mount with one of his former colleagues, who happened to be Professor Mazar.
Benjamin Mazar.
Benjamin Mazar.
And just to give people the background, so 1967, Israel liberates the eastern half of Jerusalem, and one of the things they do, one of the first things they say, hey, let's excavate around what we call the Western Wall, and what people, I don't think, called it that, but it is the Southern Wall. And so you're part of those excavations.
Yes, I started in 68.
Yeah.
Was excavating with Professor Mazar.
Wow.
And Professor Mazar and I became very good friends. I became friends with his whole family, and continued to excavate every year.
Wow.
I'd go back 5 times during the year.
Wow.
I got to where I was taking students from the university over on historical and archaeological study seminars, we call them, where they went along and actually had the opportunity to excavate or to be a part of an excavation, to tour and to study the different archaeological sites. And if you will recall, the excavations at the Temple Mount happened to be the most impressive archaeological excavations in the whole country. Although there were other places that were excavating, everybody wanted to excavate at the Temple Mount.
Yeah, of course. Now, some of the people who have been following me for many years will remember me sitting on the steps leading up to the Temple Mount, which is an historical place. When people walked up from the city of David into the temple, they walked on these very steps, and you were involved in excavating those steps. That's incredible. Tell us about that. What was that like? You dug up those steps. People didn't know those steps existed. They were, how far underground were they?
About that far.
That's it.
That's it.
So you just scraped away a few layers of dirt. And
it was like the first shovel full of dirt, you're hitting the stones.
Wow.
Because the area was known as the Ophel.
Right.
And it was all built up. It's actually an Arab tent on the top of the ground. At that time, we used to set up on the wall that joined the Temple Mount and watch them during the noon hour. And it wasn't until after the excavations had continued for several seasons that they moved through the wall and over into the area of the Ophel.
Wow. And what are other things you found in addition to the steps?
Ritual immersion baths.
So you found mikvahs where people would immerse themselves and cleanse themselves just as they were about to enter the temple.
Well, let's give a little more detail. These steps, known as the monumental staircase that led up to the southern wall of the Temple Mount, was actually the meeting place for all of the Jews during the 3 pilgrim festivals.
Wow.
That was where they sat.
And my knowledge of those steps, the association I have, is the account in the Talmud about the rabbi sitting, it says, sitting on the steps on the back of the Temple Mount, and he makes the decree about the calendar from that place. And so there was some kind of rabbinical council, maybe informal of some sorts, that was meeting there on that very spot, and you excavated that.
On that very spot.
That's incredible.
On that very spot. And that's where they came together for the 3 pilgrim festivals, Passover, Pentecost, and Tabernacles.
Amen. Wow.
And we did not know at the time when we started. I just happened because I was close personal friends with Professor Mazar.
Well, and you had a degree in archaeology. That helped.
Yes, I had a degree in archaeology. But it was not all that impressive to the other archaeologists that were in Israel with whom I was working at that time. I was just viewed as another laborer, so to speak, and given a shovel and told where to go dig. And about the first shovel full, we hit stone that later turned out to be the monumental staircase. But beyond that, which is, I think, very significant and important for our discussion, immediately adjacent to that monumental staircase was a whole series, not one, not two, but a series of ritual immersion baths called mikvaot. And I had the opportunity to personally excavate in the largest and the first one of those to be uncovered at the Temple Mount. But it's not just the ritual immersion bath that was important or impressive, but if you'll recall from the New Testament, in the book of Acts chapter 2, it talks about the events that occurred on the day of Pentecost. And it says the people all went up and got into the house. And everybody in Christendom thinks that is a house someplace that everybody met into a house.
Yeah, it was a loft that Peter was renting, right?
Yeah, well, but it had to be a very big loft.
Okay, so wait, so what was it?
What does it say? They got themselves up into Habayit.
The house.
The house. And Habayit is what?
Is the temple.
It's the temple.
So you're telling me on Pentecost in Acts chapter 2 that actually took place in the courtyard of the temple? And
not the courtyard, they're at the monumental staircase. That's where they were all gathered together because it was a day of Pentecost, and it was on Pentecost that they gathered together or assembled there.
So you're telling me those are the
monument
steps,
staircase.
not only where a rabbinical court sat and proclaimed the calendar in this Talmudic account, but where Acts 2 took place.
Where Acts 2 took place.
How many Christian pilgrims go to the Holy Land and are told that?
All of them. Oh, none of them. None of them. They all go to the Holy Land. They don't know that.
I mean, this is huge.
What is even huger, if I can use that term,
Yes, sir.
is that on the day of Pentecost, Peter says, repent and be baptized, every one of you. And
you found the mikvah where that was happening?
Where they were baptized. Right there by the monumental staircase. You know how far it is.
I've been there
Maybe
100 times.
Maybe 10, 15 steps.
Yeah.
And there are the ritual immersion baths.
Wow.
And not only that,
Wow.
but we also discovered
Wow.
that they were all Maim Chaim.
Maim Chaim, living water.
They were all living water.
Okay.
And there's several orders of ritual immersion baths and Tractate Mikvot. You can read about it in the Mishnah. But to be completely cleansed of all form of sin, it has to be in living water.
Mm-hmm.
Now, here's the question. Where did they get the water?
And let's put the context here. Jerusalem is not a place known for a lot of water. There are 2 springs in ancient times, and they're both at the bottom of the hill. One of them is still there, Ein Rogel, or Ein Gichon, that is. The other one, we're not sure where it is. How did they get this water up on the slope there?
This is amazing.
Yes, sir.
They got the water 4 or 5 miles away from the Birchat Shlomo, from the pools of Solomon, over by Bethlehem, about 4 or 5 miles away.
Wow.
How did they get it? They constructed a water aqueduct all of the way from Birchat Shlomo over the Judean hills into the ritual immersion baths at the Temple Mount. We can still follow them to this very day.
Right. And actually, if you come to Jerusalem and you go to the Tayelet, the Haz Promenade, you can see just off in the direction where the next to the United Nations building, you can see part of that aqueduct system. How it crossed over the valley between the promenade and the, I mean, that must have been quite a structure to bring the water down the valley and back up, or maybe it was some kind of
quite a structure, but how did it get from there to the Temple Mount?
Gravity?
Because the Temple Mount is 80 meters lower than the pools of Solomon.
So they use some kind of gravity.
Flowed by gravity.
Amazing.
Gravity flow.
And so what you're saying is, when Peter is delivering this sermon and he's talking about being baptized, there's an actual place there where somebody could be baptized with Maim Chaim, the living water.
They don't have to ask where.
Wow. You excavated that spot.
I excavated that very spot. As a matter of fact, I've got a picture of me standing in that ritual immersion bath excavating.
Wow.
Before we knew it was a ritual immersion bath, by the way.
Okay, because you don't know as you're digging. That's amazing. Look, I want to segue to something a little bit different. You mentioned the mishnah, the tractate of Mikvaot. I'll be honest with you, Dr. Blizzard. I haven't met a lot of folks with a heavy Ozark accent who can quote to me from the Mishnah. You actually wrote a book called The Mishnah and the Words of Jesus.
Yes.
Can you give us some examples from that book? Why is it important for somebody who's interested in Jesus, or as he was known back then, Yeshua, and we'll talk about that in a minute, but why is it important for them to interact with the Mishnah? Why would they want to know that?
Well, in the first place, they need to know, first of all, and foremost,
yes, sir,
that Jesus was a Jew.
Amen.
And as a Jew, he was acquainted with all of these rules, regulations, the different instructions that one finds in the Mishnah, and how that they were all passed on from one generation to the next, passed on from one generation to the next. And there's so many things that you learn in the Mishnah that relates to Jesus. For example, in the Mishnah, in Tractate Avot, it tells what the young man in Jesus' day was doing.
Mm-hmm. Meaning how he was educated.
How he was educated.
Yeah.
That at 5 years of age,
Yeah.
he started his formal education. And a lot of people are not aware of it, but you can go to Israel today, even until this very day, and talk to a parent, and they will tell you that they start teaching their children how to recite the Psalms when they're as young as 3 years old.
I can testify in my own experience, sitting on my father's knee at 3 years old. He was teaching me about scripture, but even beyond that, he was teaching me about Talmudic debates on various topics. Literally sitting on his knee at 3 years old, I remember him telling me about a debate between Maimonides and a rabbi named Ra'avad about when Abraham came to know God, whether he was 40 years old or 3 years old. And he's telling this to a 3-year-old. I don't know that I fully even comprehended it, but this is part of the Jewish experience. And I want to read this passage. It's Avot 5:21. Actually, can I have you read the passage? Can I hand you my computer and have you read this passage? The first couple of lines, he's going to have to put on his glasses. Guys, this is significant.
Ohaya Omer. He said, he had to say, Ben Chamesh Shanim Lemikra. 5 years of old, 5 years of age, he's ready to start studying the biblical text,
Scripture. Now, guys, I didn't say, hey, I'm going to hand this to you in the middle of the discussion, and so prepare this. You probably haven't looked at this in years.
Ben Etzer, the Mishnah, at 10, he's starting to study the Mishnah.
Right, which is the repetitions, the teachings of the rabbis.
Yeah.
Yeah, amazing, yeah.
And Ben Shalosh Esrei la mitzvot. Shlosh Esrei is 13.
Yeah.
To the mitzvot.
Right. And this is where we get the idea of bar mitzvah here from this passage, guys, in the Mishnah. And so this gives you an idea of Jesus of Nazareth, Yeshua, in his day.
This is what he's doing.
This is his curriculum of presumably how he studied. And I want to backtrack a little bit. So you go to 1966 and you eventually to Israel and you realize, hey, I don't know anything. I've been pastoring for 13 years in a church and there's a lot I don't know. And then you eventually get your PhD from UT Austin in Hebrew studies. And when you go to Israel now and you speak, I've spoken to you in Hebrew, we've held conversations. You go to Israel and people ask you, they see, okay, you know some Hebrew stuff. They say, "Ata Yehudi? Are you a Jew?" What do you say to them? You say no?
I tell them no.
Yeah.
Then they say, well, what are you? Ata Notzri?
Are you a Christian?
And I say, no. And they say, well, you've got to be one of the two. And I say, no, I am a believer.
Mm-hmm.
And they said, well, what do you mean by that? And I said, well, I'm simply one. I have rejected Protestantism. I'm not protesting anything.
Okay.
I have rejected Catholicism.
Mm-hmm.
You have to keep in mind that Jesus was a Jew.
Mm-hmm.
And he had certain followers that followed after him. He taught certain things.
Mm-hmm.
We know historically that the movement that Jesus established continued to grow much after Christianity, as we know it, was established. And according to some authorities on the subject, you can trace the existence of these Jewish Christian movements, so to speak, well into the 4th century at the present era. I say, I'm simply one who has projected.
Say it in Hebrew.
Ani rachachat shema'amin b'Yeshua, v'ani mitkaven lilmod v'lenasot la'asot kol shehu oseh.
Can I translate? Yeah. He said, I'm one who believes in Yeshua, and my intention is to learn and do everything that he says. Is that a fair translation?
Yeah, that's perfect.
Yeah. Wow. So now you told me, I want to tell people what we're doing here. I was reading, you have a website, BibleScholars.org. And I was on your website reading an article, just some article I'm reading, minding my own business. And I see at the top it says something, and it says there's an opportunity to come and study in a small group with Dr. Roy Blizzard. And I thought, well, wait, what? That can't be true. This is the man who wrote the book I read years ago when I was exploring the Hebrew background of Yeshua. And look, I'm a scholar, came from an academic background. I'm doing my own research, but I also want to see what the scholars are saying. And I find this book that you wrote, and the book by Dr. Flusser, and a book by Dr. Brad Young, and other books. I'm reading articles and books, and I see there's an opportunity to come and study with the man who wrote the book and study personally with him in Joplin, Missouri. And here I am. I spent the last 2 days sitting here in your living room. I invited my friend Keith Johnson along, and we're both sitting on your couch, and you've got these stacks of books, over 10 books that you're everything you say, you pull out a book and you read us a source. And I love that. This isn't just your opinion. You're giving us the sources. And this is what I'm about. So this has been for me an incredible experience. Guys, go over to his website, BibleScholars.org. You too can other people also do this?
Oh, yeah.
Or do you have to have a master's degree from Hebrew University to come and study? Is this open for everybody, Dr. Blizzard?
It's open for anybody that's interested in study.
So if you want to come in humility and with a sincere desire to learn, you can come and sit in this man's living room and learn things from one of the pioneers in the field. I mean, this is an incredible opportunity. I don't want anybody to miss this. This really is this is an important thing, Dr. Blizzard. In your book, I want to back up to what you were saying. So you told me something sitting here that to me was incredible revelation from an historical perspective. You explained how you said that you tell Jews in Israel, "Ani ma'amin b'Yeshua minatzeret," and then you were talking about how that word ma'amin, believer, was used by the early followers of Jesus who were Jews. Is that right?
No. Well, yes, they use the term ma'amin, but those who weren't Jews or weren't believers use the term minim.
Right. And I knew about minim because, I mean, Birkat minim is part of the 18 benedictions. I think most Jews know about this. It's essentially a curse on the Jewish followers of Yeshua that was established around the year 90 AD. And that uses the word minim, which means heretics. But you had this profound thing you shared that the believers in Yeshua themselves called themselves ma'aminim, believers. And the Jews who were opposed to them took a part of that phrase and as a slur called them minim, which is the last 2 syllables of believers, ma'aminim. It's almost like they called them leavers. You leavers, you've left the true faith, that is rabbinical Judaism, but they called themselves believers. And I asked you earlier today, I said, I've never actually heard anybody share that. That's pretty profound. And you said, but that's obvious, which I love that. Like there are things that are obvious to you that are not obvious to even people who have been studying this for years. And that's a really, really important piece of information there. In other words, you're telling me the early followers of Yeshua, of Jesus, didn't call themselves Christians?
That was a term that was used probably very late. We don't know how long, but we do know that when it says the disciples were first called Christians at Antioch, they used the term Meshichim, Messianists.
Okay.
Christian was a much later term.
Okay. So in other words, in Hebrew or in Hebrew, well, did Jesus speak Hebrew or Aramaic?
Do you want me to prove it, what he spoke?
First answer the question and then you prove.
Only Hebrew, although he probably knew Aramaic and Greek. He may have known it, maybe even some Latin.
So how do you know he spoke Hebrew? I don't want opinions. I want to share with my audience facts and information.
Look, man, this is just as clear here as it can be. And it's often just overlooked because people do not know the languages well enough. But if you turn to Mark, let me show you here. In Mark chapter 15 and verse 34, in English, it says at the last hour, the 9th hour, Jesus cried out with a loud voice, saying, Eloi, Eloi, lama sabachthani.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Notice that it's being interpreted, my God, why hast thou forsaken me? But here it is.
Wait, I want to stop you for a second. In the Greek, it has the words, which being interpreted is, my God, why have you forsaken me? In other words, that's not just in the English, the phrase which being interpreted, that's in the Greek. So it's translating from some other language. Okay.
Yes.
And what language is that?
This is Aramaic.
Okay.
Aramaic.
Yes.
But notice, it says, but some of them stood by, when they heard it, said, behold, he calleth for Elijah.
Mm-hmm. Which is
Eliyahu. Elijah. Which is Eloi. Eloi, lama sabachthani.
Mm-hmm.
But if you turn back to Matthew in chapter 27, in Matthew,
I think it's 20.
in verse number 46, it says, and at the 9th hour, Jesus cried with a loud voice, saying, Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani, which is, my God, why hast thou forsaken me?
Mm-hmm.
Now, what's the deal?
Mm-hmm.
Some say, well, he calls for Elijah.
Mm-hmm.
Eloi, Eloi in Aramaic just means one thing. My God.
Mm-hmm.
So you could never, from hearing Eloi, Eloi, think that he was calling for Elijah.
Mm-hmm.
But if he says, Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani, what's Eli?
My God. But it also sounds like Eliyahu.
But it could also be a shortened form for Eliyahu.
Wow.
And every other person that you meet on the street in Israel that's male, his name is Eli.
It's a very common name, that's for sure. So, wow.
So what this is a very clear and positive declaration establishing that Jesus spoke Hebrew.
And
not Aramaic.
And one of the things you say in your book, which is, and that's the Understanding Difficult Words of Jesus, co-written with David Bivin, you say that he actually probably said, Eli, Eli, lama azavtani.
Lama azavtani.
Which is the exact words from Psalm 22.
Which is the exact quote from Psalms 22.
So you're saying he spoke these words in Hebrew. Somewhere there was a transmission where they end up with one of the words in Aramaic, but then to understand the context, you got to go back to Hebrew.
Yes.
Wow.
But it also, even beyond that, proves that Jesus was speaking Hebrew.
Wow.
And there's another point to be made, is that shavak is also used in Hebrew.
Okay, this is a really important point. And you talk about this in the book, Understanding the Difficult Words of Jesus. One of the things you bring in this book that I actually studied archaeology for my undergrad, and one of my professors was Mishorer, who is the leading expert on coins. But you had something in the book which I believe came from Mishorer, which I didn't occur to me. It somehow I missed. Is that virtually all the coins that were minted by Jews were in Hebrew, with one exception, which is a coin, I think, of Alexander Yanai, if I'm not mistaken, or Aristobulus, one of those kings.
Alexander
Yanai. And interestingly, the coin...
the first one.
And it has Alexander Malka, which is Aramaic instead of Melech. But other than one coin, all the coins are in Hebrew, which is really... I mean, what's interesting is it's in Paleo-Hebrew, too. Even the Aramaic one. That's the part I definitely didn't know. I had somehow missed that, but that's actually really significant that Hebrew was this language that was widespread. Look, and now with the discovery of the Dead Sea Scrolls, and you have many quotes from this, particularly the Bar Kokhba scrolls, we know for sure that people were speaking Hebrew in 135 AD. So certainly they were speaking it 100 years earlier. And I want to bring a quote from your book here, and this actually is, I believe, it's an introduction from David Bivin. He says, "The truth is that one can keep reading the Bible forever, and the Bible will not tell him the meaning of these difficult passages." And you're talking there particularly about the parables of Jesus and the teachings of Jesus. They can be understood only when translated back into Hebrew. I mean, what, can you give us some examples of that? That's a powerful statement.
Well, for example, and this is one passage I think that we had noted earlier, but everybody needs to know it. They probably can quote it from Matthew chapter 5, and it says in verse number 22, it's chapter 6.
Oh, chapter 6.
It says, "The light of the body is the eye.
Yeah.
And if therefore thine eye be single, thy whole body is full of light." Now, I don't know what translation you've got there.
I've got several translations here, and they're all different.
They're all different.
They're all different because they don't know what this verse means.
Because they don't know what
so
it is.
they're doing their best to guess. They're blundering their way through it because they don't know what it means.
And some says they're single, some say whole, some say healthy, some say clear. What is it?
Yeah.
Well, in Hebrew, this is a Hebrewism, and it's used even until today, as you know.
And he asked me this yesterday, and I'm like, yeah, of course. So, but tell the people. I want them to hear it from you.
The Hebrew is
Wait,
if
guys,
you have.
Wait. Before you do this, can you read us this verse in the Hebrew of, this is a Franz Delitzsch edition, I believe?
Yes.
Which is Delitzsch was this wonderful Hebrew scholar in the 19th century. He translated the New Testament from Greek into a Mishnaic biblical style of Hebrew. So this is probably very close to what it would have sounded like.
Yes. Hu ha'ayin ve'im eincha hi tmima or tova kol gufcha ye'or ve'im eincha ra'a kol gufcha yechshach ve'hine im yechshach ha'or asher b'kirbacha ma ra hachoshech. If you've got a good eye, your whole body's filled with light.
And good eye had nothing to do with vision.
But if you've got an evil eye, your whole body is filled with choshech.
Yeah.
Darkness. And how great is that darkness?
So and it was interesting. There was a lady who was sitting here as part of the study group where you were teaching people all day yesterday and today, and she made the remark. She said, "We've read that our whole lives, and we just blur past it because we don't know what it means. We just move on right past it. It's just words. It sounds really pretty, but we don't know what it means. I hear that in Hebrew. I know exactly what it means. Would you tell the people what it means? What's an evil eye?
Evil eye means miserly. Or stingy,
That's right.
And a good eye means generous.
That's right. And these are just Hebrew expressions.
And they use them today.
Ad hayom hazeh, until this very day.
Give with a good eye.
Yeah. Right. And if you think about where it comes from is, I kind of don't want to give that. And you're looking at it like, you're not happy about giving it. That's the bad eye. And the good eye is like, oh, here, I'm generously giving. So, wow. And so
used many, many times in the Mishnah.
So you can't really understand that phrase without understanding the Jewish context and the Hebrew context of that expression. So what a great example. That's the type of thing, guys, in the book, Understanding the Difficult Words of Jesus. I want to ask you for another example, and this is one we talked about before, Matthew 5:21-22. I think that I heard this one, and I'm like, okay, that's like the connections there after you say it, it's like, oh, that's obvious, but I don't know that I would have ever made these connections myself.
You've heard that it was said by them of old time, thou shalt not kill, and whoever shall kill shall be in danger of the judgment. But I say unto you that whosoever is angry with his brother without a cause shall be in danger of the judgment, and whosoever shall say to his brother, Rakah, shall be in danger of the council, and whosoever shall say, thou fool, shall be in danger of hellfire. Now, I want to ask the people that are in the audience, how many have ever heard their pastor, or anyone else for that matter, ever preach or give a sermon or an exegesis on this particular subject? And the answer to that question is probably very few.
Okay. And certainly, even if an exegesis was given, if an explanation was given, it's not what you're about to explain. He read it to me from Franz Delitzsch's Hebrew and then explained it. And I'm like, well, that makes perfect sense. Like the people in the audience would have understood this. These were Jews in the audience at the Sermon on the Mount, standing there at the bottom of the mountain as as Yeshua was teaching and preaching, and they understood these things.
שמעתם כי נאמר לקדמונים, לא תרצח, ואשר ירצח מיוחד הוא לבית דין. Now, we might explain that in the first century in Judaism, they had certain courts of law. And they had the Bet Din, which was the house of judgment, that was actually a congregational court. But they also had additional courts that were called Sanhedrin. And the people that are watching may be more familiar with the term Sanhedrin.
Which is the same thing as Sanhedrin.
Than with the Bet Din. But they had a small Sanhedrin and they had a large Sanhedrin.
Right.
And the large Sanhedrin sat in Jerusalem, the council at Sanhedrin, 71 members of the great Sanhedrin. And this says, but whosoever shall say to his brother, Rakah, shall be in danger of the Sanhedrin. But whosoever Yomar Atahanaval.
Wow. Yeah, this is the part. Explain what that means.
Atahanaval.
Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you what I'm going to do is that I'm going to go to this book.
Yeah.
Every Man's Talmud.
Okay.
And I'm going to open it to page 3 that has to do with the doctrine of God, and I'm going to read.
Please.
Right here. Whether atheism, in the sense of dogmatic denial of God's existence, was accepted by anybody in biblical times and rabbinic times is doubtful. But both in the Bible and the Talmud, the concern was with the practical atheist who conducted his life as though he would never have to be accounted to for his deeds. In the biblical literature, the statement, there is no God, is made by the Naval. In other words, the morally corrupt person who, while acknowledging the existence of a creator, refused to believe that he was at all interested in the action of his creatures. His counterpart in the Talmud is the Apikoros, or the Epicurean, who likewise denies the fundamental principle of religion by his abominable conduct. The rabbis defined the atheist as one who affirmed there is no judgment and no judge in the universe, irrespective of his disbelief in the existence of God. And the whole deal is that in the biblical text, in Psalms, chapter 14, verse 1, it says, what? The fool has said in his heart, there is no God.
So what you're saying, what you're doing here is you're tying this all together. You're using here a Jewish resource, and what people didn't see is in the book, there are all these notes, Baba Batra, 16b, etc. In other words, this rabbi isn't just making things up. He's basing it on ancient Jewish sources. And you're tying all that together with Psalm 14:1 and Psalm 53:1, where it says in both of those, the Naval says in his heart, the fool says in his heart, there is no God. And when Yeshua says, don't call a man a fool, essentially, right? I'm paraphrasing. But if you call a man a fool, then you'll be subject to the hellfire or whatever. Explain what you explained yesterday, what that means. What is he really saying here? What does it mean to call someone a fool?
What it means, the Naval is that this person is separated from God. He's not in any kind of relationship with God. He doesn't care about God. We would say that he was an atheist today, but that's not the term that they were using. It's
right.
that he was a individual who might have believed that there was a God, but didn't believe that in any way he was responsible for his own actions.
And what you explained yesterday is that Jesus is saying, when he says, if you say, you fool, you'll be liable to the hellfire, what I understood from you yesterday is he's saying, don't question somebody else's relationship with the creator of the universe. Is that
Well, once you do,
yeah.
you have made yourself to be God.
I want to reiterate this. This is powerful stuff. Because what I've encountered with a lot of Christians is, and I don't think this is just Christians, but I've seen this with a lot of Christians and even some Jews. Well, they'll say, well, that person has the wrong doctrine. Oh, that person's relationship with God is not right. We have the correct thing over here, and those people are wrong, and they're not, and they don't have. And what I understood from you yesterday is that when he says, don't, and if you say Naval, you'll be liable to hellfire. It's not just you're saying the person is stupid. You're saying he doesn't.
They're lost. They're separated from God.
And so you should not accuse someone of being separated from God.
No, because that's not up to you. That's not your decision to make. Judge not that you be not judged.
Amen. Wow. This is powerful stuff, Dr. Blues. I want to sit with you all day, but we got to start wrapping it up. I want to ask you one last thing, and this is something that came up completely unexpected yesterday. I'm sitting there yesterday on your couch, and you mentioned something about pronunciation of names. And it's not a secret to people that the pronunciation of God's name is something really close to my heart. So I asked you what was really just a very innocent question. I said, Dr. Blizzard, you've got a PhD in Hebrew studies. You've been studying these things for decades. You've got stacks of books. In your understanding, what is the pronunciation of the name of the God of Israel in the Hebrew Bible?
Well, it's not my pronunciation. It's what the biblical text says.
Yes. And what does it say?
It says, God says, when Moses asked him, what shall I tell the people when I go back down there to Egypt, who it was that sent me? And he says, Ehyeh asher ehyeh. Then he goes on to explain that it's Yehovah.
Would you read us those verses from the Hebrew Tanakh?
Yehovah. In the book of Exodus,
yes, sir.
Chapter 3, and Moses is asking God a very innocent question. Moses says to God,
wait, I want to stop you here. His finger is moving along the Hebrew text, and he's translating in English as he goes.
He said, whenever I get back down there, who am I going to say sent me? And Vayomer Elohim, and God said to Moses, Ehyeh asher ehyeh.
And how do you understand that phrase?
Means I am who I says I am, and it's really not any of your business.
Okay.
I am who I will be. I will be who I will be.
Amen.
And
Ehyeh asher ehyeh.
Yeah, Ehyeh asher ehyeh, Ko tomar livnei Yisrael, Ehyeh shalachni Elechem. And he says again, again, I'm going to say to the people of Israel, Bnei Yisrael.
Yes.
And if I'm reading correctly, this says Yehovah.
That's what it says right there. Now, you've definitely heard people say it's Yahweh.
Oh,
and
Yehoshua and Yahuwah and just about.
So you've heard those before?
Oh, yes. I hear it every day because it's all on Facebook or it's someplace else on the internet and coming forth from people that are supposedly well-meaning, good folk, except they've got one major fault.
Oh, what's that?
They don't know Hebrew.
And there it is, people. Thank you from Joplin, Missouri. You heard it here, right here from Dr. Roy Blizzard, PhD, the author of the groundbreaking work, Understanding the Difficult Words of Jesus. Shalom.
You have been listening to Hebrew Voices with Nehemia Gordon. Thank you for supporting Nehemia's McCore Hebrew Foundation. Learn more at nehemiaswall.com.